Hey guys, tonight we sink into the velvet-lined chaos that is Greek mythology's favorite chaos gremlin, Dionysus. Imagine this, there's a distant hum of a lyre somewhere, incense curling through warm Mediterranean air, and in the middle of it all is a man draped in leopard skins, wine goblet in hand, eyes twinkling like he knows something you don't, which he does. He's a god, a younger god, the last to join the Olympian clique, and he's mad about it. You probably won't survive this, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy cult of ours has spread now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts the way a lot of Greek myths do: violence, scandal, and a woman regretting her decisions. Semele, a mortal princess, gets herself tangled up with Zeus, the king of gods and serial shapeshifter. He's been wooing her disguised as a mortal man, because of course he has. But when Semele gets pregnant, the gossip starts sizzling like lamb fat on a spit. Hera, Zeus's wife and long-suffering queen of Mount Olympus, finds out, and she doesn't yell. She doesn't throw plates. She goes full psychological warfare, posing as an old nursemaid. She sweetly convinces Semele to ask Zeus to show her his true form, his god form, which is a bit like asking to stare directly into the sun while your retinas are replaced with dry leaves. So Zeus appears in all his lightning-scorched glory, and Semele is instantly incinerated. Just poof, gone. But the fetus is still clinging to life, despite the whole mother turned into cosmic ash situation. And here's where it gets extra. Zeus does what any panic-stricken immortal would do. He slices open his thigh and sews the fetus into it. So, Dionysus is born from a thigh. It's not a metaphor, it's just Greek mythology being Greek mythology. Historians still argue whether this thigh birth is a metaphor for rebirth, or just a strange attempt to one-up other origin stories. But either way, it leaves you with a god who has 2 births and exactly 0 consistent parental figures. He's not like the other gods. He's a cosmic glitch, a divine accident, a wine-splashed wildcard, and when he arrives on Olympus, cute, chaotic, and thigh-fresh, nobody really knows what to do with him. Some say the other gods reject him outright. He's too mortal, too emotional, too weird. Hera obviously hates him, for obvious reasons. Zeus loves him, sort of, in the please don't remind me of that time I emergency parented from my legway. So Dionysus is shipped off. Some say he's raised by mountain nymphs. Others whisper about a faraway kingdom called Nysa, where he's hidden among mortals like a mythic Harry Potter. Either way, Olympus wants nothing to do with him. He's a walking scandal in grapevine sandals, and yet you can already feel the future theater kid energy radiating off him. He's emotional, he's dramatic, he loves masks and transformation. He's the only Greek god who knows how to properly sob in a meadow, while composing a haunting flute solo. One lesser-known detail: Dionysus reportedly invents the dithyramb, a wild, wine-fueled choral song that sounds like a bunch of goats arguing over karaoke. These were the proto-theater performances. Fringe fact: dithyramb literally means double birth hymn, because even his musical choices scream "ask me about my trauma." So, Dionysus grows up knowing 2 things: that he was born of flame and flesh, and that he was never really wanted on Olympus. That kind of cosmic abandonment does things to a god. And when you're immortal, petty becomes a lifestyle. You start to see the world not in black and white, but in tragedy and comedy, joy and madness, wine and blood. And right now, you're sitting next to him as he leans into that duality, swirling his goblet, watching the stars flicker above like footlights. He's not just going to get revenge, he's going to build an entire art form out of it. You're still beside him as the stars blink quietly above, and Dionysus adjusts the folds of his robe like he's preparing for a performance, because he always is. But to understand his drama, you need to rewind to the part where being born once wasn't enough. His entire existence begins with rejection, flame, and frantic thigh stitching. So naturally, identity becomes his lifelong obsession. Dionysus doesn't just enter the world confused, he enters as a contradiction. His mother was mortal, his father was king of the gods. His first home was a womb, his second, Zeus's meaty leg. This is the divine equivalent of a child custody case, conducted entirely via metaphor. But once he's cut from Zeus's thigh, blood-slick and glowing, he isn't swaddled in Olympus's silk. He's yeeted out, hidden. He's like that one glitchy app on your phone that Apple won't acknowledge exists. You don't delete it, but you definitely don't want it crashing your system. So he's smuggled off to mortal lands. And depending on who's telling the story, he's raised by the nymphs of Mount Nysa, or fostered by Semele's mortal relatives in Boeotia. Either way, it's less divine nursery and more extended wilderness staycation with deeply questionable childcare. Imagine being a literal god, toddling through grapevines, feral goats, and confused shepherds, all while experiencing human emotions without the godly instruction manual. His caretakers try their best. They teach him about nature, music, vine magic, but also, they're winging it. No one prepares you to raise a thigh-born wine deity with abandonment issues. You, walking beside child Dionysus now, notice how deeply he watches people. He doesn't just exist, he observes, he absorbs. He's quietly drafting the script of his life like a playwright with a blood feud, mainstream fact, time. Dionysus is technically the last god to join the Olympian 12. That's right, the seats were full. He has to boot Hestia, goddess of the hearth, just to squeeze in. And even then, some versions claim he's only invited because his fan base, his cult, gets too large to ignore. Olympus doesn't want Dionysus, they need him. Theatre kid energy, indeed. But back to his Boeotian upbringing. You can feel the loneliness forming layers in him like vintage wine. Every skipped feast, every unanswered prayer from Mount Olympus builds the flavor of his divine bitterness. There's also a lot of fermented fruit and hallucinations involved, which doesn't help. Fringe tidbit. One lesser-known myth says Dionysus transforms into a goat as a child to escape Hera's wrath. Imagine that tiny god-goat bounding through the woods, yelping in existential confusion, bleating toward destiny. It's bizarre, but weirdly fitting. Goats are chaotic. Goats eat everything. Goats will climb vertical walls just because. Dionysus is emotionally that goat. As you follow him through these early years, you notice something. He never seems comfortable standing still. He dances, he sings, he stumbles into people's dreams. The vines grow faster when he's near. His breath smells like wine even as a child. He's not meant to settle, he's meant to spread. Historians still argue whether this period in Boeotia was real or mythic placeholder, but symbolically it matters. This is where the seeds of his later revenge, are planted. And like everything else Dionysus touches, they will bloom into something dramatic and dangerous. One afternoon, he looks at the mortals around him and just snaps. It starts as a kind of divine fever. His mind begins to unravel like badly spun thread. Some say it's Hera's curse. Others say it's too much power with no outlet. Either way, Dionysus begins wandering, raving, slipping into madness like it's a new toga. The people he meets start joining him, first out of pity, then curiosity, then something deeper. He's magnetic in the way unstable stars are beautiful and inevitably destructive. And as you watch this unfolding from the tree line, you realize something haunting. He wants them to follow. Not because he craves attention, but because he's writing a myth in real time. He's building a narrative, one wild barefoot believer at a time. By the time he's a teenager, whatever that means for a god, he's amassed a full-blown entourage. Not warriors, not priests, women, mortals, outsiders. The kind of people Olympus usually pretends don't exist. He teaches them about wine, about music, about transformation, and also madness, because the line between the three is very, very thin. At night, they scream his hymns under moonlight. By day, they vanish into woods thick with illusion. You want to look away, but you can't. You've just met the Maenads, and Dionysus, thigh-born twice child of Zeus and Flame, is no longer just a boy in exile. He's becoming a god with a plan. You're deep in the woods now. The air smells like crushed time and regret. Dionysus has grown into something tall, slouching, and hypnotic-like. If a wine bottle developed opinions and eyeliner, his gaze is velvet, but his smile, that's where the knives are. You followed him through the weird years. The thigh birth, the foster nymphs, the goat phase. But now you're stepping into Olympus-level trauma, being the family. Embarrassment. Imagine being the child of the top god in a pantheon, only to find out you're the divine equivalent of a half-baked side project. Dionysus isn't just misunderstood, actively sidelined. The other Olympians see him as too soft, too emotional, too human. You hear it whispered when he's not around. He's not really one of us, Zeus. He does that classic deadbeat divinity thing. Occasionally supportive in public, but never really commits to defending Dionysus in godly HR meetings. And Hera. She doesn't just dislike him, she campaigns against him. Petty queen behavior. She sends madness after him like it's Amazon Prime. The rest of the gods. Imagine a celestial group chat with everyone rolling their eyes every time Dionysus posts a poem. He's the theater kid in a family of warriors, harvest managers, and lightning-throwing jocks. Even Apollo, patron of the arts, keeps his lyre far away from Dionysus's wine-stained fingers. There's a chill when they pass. It's not sibling rivalry. It's ideological warfare. Mainstream historical context alert. The ancient Greeks did not have a unified view of Dionysus. In some regions, he was front and center. In others, a suspicious latecomer. His cult often got treated like the Goth. Kids of the religious scene, intense, emotional, ungovernable. Athens embraced him. Sparta looked the other way. Delphi took forever to return his celestial texts. And here's a fun little overlooked tidbit. Some early myths suggest Dionysus had to earn his godhood through trials. He didn't just inherit power. He suffered, bled, walked, died, even then came back. Kind of a divine boot camp with grape juice. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was originally a foreign god adopted into the Greek pantheon, possibly from Thrace or Phrygia. That's why he always feels like a guest who never fully unpacks. His symbols are different. His rituals are wild. His whole vibe disrupts the usual godly brunch aesthetic. So what does he do? He leaves. Not with drama, not with a storm, just a subtle slouch and an eye roll. He disappears from Olympus and sets off into the wild. If they won't let him sit at the table, he'll build his own feast stand, invite everyone they pretend. Doesn't matter. You follow him across fields and borders. He walks like someone who's been rejected so many times. Rejection just becomes background noise. Mortals don't know he's a god. Sometimes he doesn't even tell them. He just shows up, offers a drink, and listens. But slowly, very slowly, the chaos begins. Towns he visits start behaving oddly. Their rulers go mad. Their women flee to the forests. Their vineyards bloom out of season. People whisper of a stranger with ivy in his hair and honey in his voice. He makes them see things, feel things, lose themselves, and you start noticing a pattern. He doesn't just travel, he tests. Each city becomes a little experiment in belief. Will they recognize me? Will they join? Or will they try to stop me? The ones who embrace him, ecstasy, revelry, a temporary escape from mortal constraints. The ones who resist, oh buddy, there's a soft cruelty to his revenge. It's never loud, never explosive, but always personal. Like changing a king's clothes mid-prayer, like making a queen laugh uncontrollably until she weeps, like vines curling slowly up the steps of a palace no one can leave anymore. He's not violent in the way Ares is. He doesn't do brute force. Dionysus uses transformation. He turns logic inside out, and then hands you a mirror so you can see yourself unravel. And that's when you realize, this isn't just a god on a road trip. It's performance art. His life is a moving, bleeding, musical protest. A divine experiment in what happens when the rejected kid becomes the playwright. He doesn't want Olympus's approval anymore. He wants their attention. And if he has to burn down half of Greece in interpretive dance to get it, he absolutely will. You wake up among strangers. Well, they look like strangers, but they're dancing in a circle around a bonfire, barefoot, eyes half closed, limbs dripping with wine and flower garlands. One woman screams something poetic at the moon, and someone else throws goat blood into the flames like it's glitter. And there, in the center, is Dionysus, now fully transformed into the kind of leader who makes cult documentaries. Trending on modern streaming services, he moves through the crowd like a breeze through silk. He doesn't command, he suggests. He doesn't preach, he invites, and people follow. The kind of follow that makes you forget your name, your chores, your taxes. This is the birth of the Dionysian mysteries. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Dionysus's worship wasn't about temples or hymns or polished marble statues. It was mystery, religion, baby, ecstatic rituals, private initiations, experiences designed to crack open the soul like an overripe fig in the forests, in the shadows, in the minds of women and outcasts and forgotten farmers. This is where his gospel spreads, not written down, not debated in symposiums, lived, shouted, danced, the initiates, often women called Maenads, the raving ones. They leave their homes, their duties, sometimes even their clothes, to follow Dionysus into the wild. They're not just fans, they're devotees, and their transformation is not metaphorical. When the spirit hits, they change. literally, sometimes. They gain unnatural strength. Sometimes they speak in tongues. Sometimes they rip animals apart with their bare hands. You, watching this, feel the tug, the wild part of your brain that wants to run into the trees and scream something primal. He's offering liberation, yes, but also madness. The line is thin. Dionysus doesn't walk it. He dances across it in heels and glitter. Fringe tidbit in some versions of the myth. Dionysus travels all the way to India, spreading his cult, like a cosmic music tour. There's not a ton of evidence for this historically, but it tells you something about his legend, how far he's willing to go to be understood, or maybe just to be felt. Historians still argue whether the myths were real historical figures or mythic symbols of social anxiety. Like, was this actually happening in 5th century BCE forests? Or was it just Athenian men projecting their fear of free women onto grape-based hallucinations? Regardless, the stories exist. You hear about King Lycurgus, who tried to ban Dionysus, worship, and ended up raving mad, stabbing his own son. About the women of Orchomenus, who refused to join the Bacchic rites and were turned into bats. Bats, you know you've crossed into divine drama territory when people are punished via aggressive transformation into Chiroptera, and still he doesn't stop. Every village he enters becomes another improvisational stage. His processions grow weirder, louder. Leopard skins, golden masks, tambourines. He rides a chariot pulled by panthers. People throw flowers in his path. They scream his name between sobs of joy and terror. But the deeper truth is, this isn't about fun, not really. It's about power, because Dionysus has discovered something the other gods haven't. The human psyche. It's pliable. It wants to unravel. And if you can give someone permission to lose control, just for a night you own them. He doesn't build temples. He builds experiences. He doesn't ask for worship. He gets devotion. That's why his followers defend him like zealots. They don't just believe in Dionysus. They've become something else because of him. And they don't go back to who they were before. You spot him across the firelight now, his face painted in theatrical red, his hair dripping with oil and petals. He locks eyes with you. You coming? He asks. And it's not really a question. You follow him. Of course you do. Because once Dionysus calls you, it's like saying no to gravity. You're pulled. Not by force, but by the promise of finally becoming something unedited, something loud and raw and real. The path you walk now isn't paved. It's trodden dirt, littered with grape skins and discarded silk. The air smells like sweat, honey, and the first bite of rot. Dionysus doesn't just give you wine. He gives you permission. And here comes the madness. He's older now, divine adulthood. Whatever that means for someone born twice and raised on rejection. He no longer needs Olympus. He has a following, a full-fledged movement. But this isn't peace. It's pressure. It's combustion. And every movement he makes now pulses with that dangerous, simmering tension of someone who has just barely survived himself. This is the era historians call Dionysus's wandering madness. Some blame her eternal rival, patron saint, of jealousy and long memory. Others blame the trauma of not being accepted by his divine family. But you can see it in his eyes now. This isn't ordinary madness. It's sacred, weaponized. He's not out of control. He's ahead of control. Mainstream historical insight. The Greeks had no clean line between inspiration and madness. The word enthusiasmos literally means to be filled with a god. Dionysus doesn't possess you like a demon. He fills you until you overflow, until your skin can't contain your thoughts anymore. Then you scream, dance, bite, transcend. You're starting to understand why this god has no chill. One fringe account claims that Dionysus was once chained and imprisoned by mortals in Thebes. In this version, he lets it happen. Just watches, smiles, because he knows what's coming. When they try to hold him, the prison melts into vines, and the guards run mad, gnawing on each other like they're appetizers at a cursed symposium. Historians still argue whether these tales are metaphors for cultural upheaval or just ancient fan fiction. But for Dionysus, symbol and story are the same. He is the myth. He is the narrative. That's the trick. That's the show. You're now part of his troupe, not just as a spectator. You're in it. You're moving with the Maenads, barefoot, breathless, bruised from dancing on tree roots. You see someone convulsing on the ground, eyes rolled back, chanting verses they couldn't possibly have known. You see an old man with ivy braided into his beard, weeping because he's seen his dead wife in the flames. And you see Dionysus, laughing just at the edge of the light, laughing not cruelly, but like someone who finally understands their role in the cosmic joke. He doesn't cause madness, he reveals it, like a mirror with no filters. He takes you to mountains, islands, hidden places where polite gods don't go, and everywhere the same ritual unfolds. Wine, music, surrender. You meet satyrs who play flutes with obscene confidence. You hear drums so loud they rattle your bones. You lose hours, maybe days. No one tells time in Dionysus's world. Then you hear the stories, quiet whispered ones, of cities that tried to reject him, of kings who mocked the orgies, banned the masks, laughed at the tambourines, and how those kings without exception were destroyed, not by thunderbolts, not by armies, by their own people, transformed, intoxicated, touched by something. Ancient and wild, the common folk rise up. One town, it's the women who do it. Another time, it's the priests. No swords, just ecstasy. Just frenzied hands and broken illusions. And suddenly, you get it. Dionysus doesn't destroy power. He infects it. He makes order impossible. Which, honestly, is way more terrifying. He doesn't rule by fear. He rules by release. You catch up to him by a riverbank now. He's washing his hands. They're clean. But the water turns purple as it hits his fingers. He looks over his shoulder. This is only the beginning, he says, like someone giving a warning wrapped in velvet. And you believe him. The wine is stronger now. Or maybe it's you who's weaker. Hard to say. You're on a dirt road that shouldn't be this loud, but it hums beneath your feet like it's vibrating with laughter. Dionysus walks ahead, not touching the ground so much as flirting with it. You think maybe he's leading you to a party, but the mood's shifted. Something about the tilt of his head, the way his Maenads aren't singing tonight, how the satyrs are whispering in clusters like schoolboys after detention. He's rebranding, because even chaos needs PR. Here's the thing, his reputation's caught up with him. Dionysus isn't just the weird kid with divine daddy issues anymore. He's the god of wine, yes, but also madness, transformation, and performance. He's part confessional booth, part mosh pit, part immersive therapy session that occasionally ends in a lion costume and legal questions. But people are scared now. All this ecstasy and wildness, it's starting to look like rebellion. And so, he adapts. This is the genius of Dionysus. When they call him a cult leader, he smiles and invents religion. When they say he's insane, he hands out titles: priestess, initiate, bearer of the Thersis. When they ask for order, he gives them mysteries, rituals, so intricate, so theatrical, so emotionally destabilizing. People leave them crying and call it divine enlightenment. Mainstream fact: the Dionysian mysteries are the blueprint for emotional transformation. Unlike the polished temples of Apollo or Athena, these rites were messy, intimate, and overwhelmingly sensory. Participants reenacted death and rebirth, often with masks, dancing, and a concerning lack of clothing. You sneak a glance at the women closest to him, no longer just forest followers. They're dressed in fawnskins, wielding ivy-wrapped staffs, tipped with pine cones. They have names now, roles. Some are oracles, some perform sacred chants. One kisses a snake like it's a pet parakeet. It's not just performance, it's liturgy. Except the gospel here is ecstasy, and the punishment for doubt usually involves wine, tears, and aggressive plant-based revenge. Fringe tidbit: Dionysus once turns an entire spring into wine just to mess with some local skeptics. They refuse to believe he's a god, so he turns their bathwater into Merlot. Subtle flex, great branding. Historians still argue whether the Dionysian rites were liberation or indoctrination. Were they feminist uprisings cloaked in myth? Were they mass hallucinations wrapped in theology? Or were they ancient group therapy sessions with better snacks and less insurance paperwork? What no one debates is this: they worked. People came back different. Dionysus figured out something the other gods didn't. People crave transformation. They don't want to pray. They want to change. They want to forget who they are. Then, maybe, remember again. But better, shinier, less alone. You step into one of the sacred spaces, now no temple, just a glade glowing with torchlight. There's music, but no instruments. Just breath, footfalls, the rustle of robes, the smell of resin and fermented things. You're offered a mask, made of bark and cloth, and when you put it on, your name disappears for a moment. You're not you anymore, and neither is Dionysus. He's many things now: your brother, your goddess, your worst impulse, your truest self. He plays the part you won't admit you need. His smile stretches. His eyes change color in the firelight, and he whispers the same thing to each of you. You're not broken, you're becoming. It's manipulative, sure, but it's also not wrong, because the person you were when you arrived at this ritual, you don't see them anymore, and that's the point. You're running now, through trees that blur into shadow and moonlight, following the sound of laughter that could just as easily be screaming. The Maenads are ahead, and they're not skipping anymore. They're charging, eyes wide, mouths open. Thyrsis staffs rattling like someone shook a forest and it came to life angry and barefoot. Dionysus has let the leash off. This isn't the soft madness of wine and slow dances. This is the feral edge, the divine hunger, and at the center of it him. Dionysus calm as ever, watching, barefoot, maybe wearing leopard print, maybe wearing nothing at all. He looks like he just finished crying or cackling, and either way, you know this is about to get biblical in the most off-script sense. Mainstream. Myth time. The story of Dionysus and Pentheus. Pentheus is the king of Thebes. Young, proud, rational. He hates chaos, loves law. Thinks Dionysus is a fraud, and his followers are just hormonal women on a wine cleanse. Classic ancient buzzkill. So when the god rolls into town with his mystery cult, Pentheus tries to ban it. Bad move. Dionysus lets himself be arrested. Because he's here for the drama. In the cell, he calmly dismantles the physical world. Chains fall off. Doors swing open. Earthquakes gently insult the foundation of Thebes and Pentheus. Instead of taking the hint and calling in sick to tyranny, he doubles down. Orders a spy mission into the Dionysian rites. But Dionysus, he's directing this whole tragicomedy. He convinces Pentheus to dress as a woman. To go unnoticed, he says. To see what the ladies are really doing out there. And Pentheus, blinded by arrogance and an unsettling curiosity, agrees. Now imagine a king in drag, stumbling through the woods in heels, peeking through leaves at women who've already gone full wild. Dionysus gives him just enough rope to walk into fate's mouth. The Maenads spot him. They don't see a king, they see a wild animal, a threat. Or maybe they don't see anything at all there, in that holy frenzy where reality bends like reeds in wine wind. They tear him apart. Limb from limb, one of them is his mother Agave. She holds his head up, triumphant, before realizing who it is. It's theatrical, it's devastating. It's exactly Dionysus's point. Fringe tidbit. Some versions of the myth suggest Dionysus restores Pentheus after death, maybe just the body, maybe the soul. Scholars still debate if this was mercy or insult, maybe both. Historians still argue whether this myth was a warning against impiety or a revenge fantasy written by someone who got bullied by theater kids in high school. Either way, the symbolism is heavy. Pentheus refuses to acknowledge Dionysus's power, refuses to even look at it straight, and is destroyed by that denial. And you, watching all this unfold from the shadows, you see what Dionysus has built. Not just a religion, a theater of the mind, a ritual system that weaponizes empathy, spectacle, and taboo. He doesn't kill Pentheus with lightning. He makes other people do it, through belief, through performance, through sheer existential choreography, because the best revenge isn't fire, it's irony, and the curtain has just dropped. You're still in Thebes, though you might not recognize it anymore. The streets are quiet now, scrubbed clean of the blood and madness from last night's performance. The city tries to forget. People sweep faster, whisper less, but the scent of Dionysus still clings to the air like spilled wine on a borrowed robe. And the gods, oh, they're definitely watching. Dionysus, he's gone. He never lingers. His work here is done. The king is dead, the cult is viral, and the city is a cautionary tale now. You don't stage a more tragic, gender-bending revenge play, and then stick around to explain it. He's on the road again, and this time you're sailing with him, literally. You wake up to waves slapping against wood, and a salty wind that smells like seaweed and stolen secrets. You're on a ship, someone's ship, and Dionysus, he's lying on the deck like a bored tourist, hair tousled, feet bare, a small knowing smirk curled around a grape he probably conjured. Out of boredom, the crew doesn't know who he is. Bad move. Mainstream myth alert. This is the pirate story. A gang of Tyrrhenian pirates spots Dionysus alone on a beach, dressed in silk, jewelry gleaming. They assume he's a rich kid or a lost noble, either way, ransom bait. So they grab him, tie him up, and sail off toward profit. Only problem, you can't kidnap a god unless he wants to be kidnapped. And Dionysus, he wants to make a point. The ropes fall off, just slide away. The ship groans, like it knows it's part of a metaphor. Ivy starts sprouting from the mast. Vines coil around the oars. Grapes hang from the rigging. Lions appear on deck. Lions on a boat. A panther yawns by the helm like it's late for rehearsal. And the pirates, they panic. They jump into the sea, screaming. Dionysus turns them into dolphins. Yes, dolphins. Fringe tidbit. Some versions say that dolphins retain their human memories and help lost sailors out of guilt. Others suggest Dionysus just liked dolphins and thought, it'd be funny. Historians still argue whether this myth was a metaphor for divine transformation or a piece of early Greek marine conservation propaganda. Either way, it showcases Dionysus's favorite performance trick, poetic justice. You stare at the empty deck now, the sea calm, the dolphins circling playfully like backup dancers. Dionysus stands at the prow, the wind lifting his robes, just enough for theatrical effect. That's the thing about pirates, he says without turning round. They think everything can be stolen. You realize he's not just talking about loot. Dionysus has a habit of being underestimated. Pirates see a victim. Kings see a nuisance. Olympians see a misfit. But he keeps flipping the script. He lets people project onto him, then watches as they trip over their own assumptions and fall face first into metaphorical vines. You ask yourself why he didn't just explode the ship, or hurl lightning, or summon a kraken, because that's not his style. Dionysus isn't here for destruction. He's here for transformation and punishment, yes, but it's always themed. Now, the ship changes course, though no one's steering. Dionysus hums something soft, something old. The kind of tune you can't remember once it's over, but it leaves a taste of time and salt on your tongue. You're still not sure if he forgives the pirates, but you are sure they deserved the ending they got. The ship drifts into dawn like a stage curtain falling in reverse. The horizon blushes pink, and you find yourself anchored near a coastline dripping with morning mist and fig trees. Dionysus yawns dramatically, stretches like a cat who knows it's being watched, and hops off the boat without a word. You follow, because by now it's muscle memory. Where he goes, weirdness follows. And sure enough, the land ahead is humming with tension. You don't know the city's name yet, but it smells like fear, trying very hard to be polite. Thebes was a lesson. This is a homecoming. Dionysus is returning, and he's not knocking. The city is Thebes again. But this time, it's not about punishment, it's about legacy. He was born here, burned here, stitched into godhood by a thigh and a crisis. And now he's stepping back onto the soil like a celebrity who got snubbed at the Oscars and came back to host. But this visit's different, slower, more theatrical. You can feel it. Dionysus isn't angry. He's performing. Every movement is deliberate. Every silence timed for maximum dramatic tension. This is less a reckoning and more a one-god parade of closure. The mortals, of course, don't get it. They're still picking grapevines out of their chimneys from the last time he came through. They remember the Maenads, the screaming, the dismemberment. They remember the king in drag and the mothers who lost themselves. So when he appears at the gates, looking radiant and uncannily calm, they don't cheer, they brace. But Dionysus, he doesn't want their worship, not really. He wants their attention. That's the price of ignoring him. Sooner or later, you have to see him. Mainstream historical fact. Dionysus was one of the few Greek gods said to physically visit his places of worship. Not just symbolically, He arrived. In rituals, his presence was enacted, sometimes literally, with a masked actor or a priest riding a cart pulled by real animals. The god who travels, touches, enters. No distant deity business. He was here, in your face, wearing animal print. Fringe tidbit. There's a lesser-known ritual in Thebes where they bury a mask of Dionysus underground and dig it up later, symbolizing his death and rebirth, the god who comes and goes, who is buried, fermented, and resurrected, the wine in winter, the madness in spring. Historians still argue whether this return to Thebes motif was a political allegory or a mythic metaphor for confronting trauma. But for Dionysus, it's just a script he's lived too many times. You're walking through the city now. People pretend not to notice him. Doors shut gently. Street performers pack up early. But then a child sees him and waves. And he waves back like a king greeting his first subject. A priest hesitates at a temple threshold. A flute. Player drops her instrument and follows. It begins again, not with fire. With curiosity, you end up in the palace square. Dionysus pauses, looks around like a realtor surveying a fixer-upper with history. Then he sits, just sits, on the steps, like he's got all the time in the world. And in a way, he does. You notice something strange. No one asks him to leave. No one can, because his presence isn't a demand, it's a mirror. He brings out what people are already hiding. Their fears, their cravings, their unfinished monologues. He doesn't start the madness. He activates it. Thebes, this time, doesn't collapse in violence. It ripples, quietly. People start seeing visions, having dreams. A mother leaves her laundry and walks into the woods. A merchant closes early and starts chanting old songs. Under his breath, no masks, no drama, just inevitability. You sit beside Dionysus. He offers you a grape. It tastes like memory and rain. You can always come home, he says, but it'll never be the same. And with that, he stands, and just like that, he leaves again. No fire, no fire. Because sometimes the most powerful performance is the one where the curtain never falls. Thebes fades behind you like the ghost of a play that ended on a line no one understood. Dionysus doesn't look back. He never does. That's the trick. He leaves cities smoking or singing, or both, and never sticks around for the reviews. You're moving again, wandering with him through fields that don't know his name yet. You sleep beside olive trees, wake up with your head in moss. He's quieter now, reflective, maybe, or bored, hard to tell. His moods roll in like storm clouds made of silk and grape vapor. Then, one morning, he stops, mid-step, looks around. Let's try Athens. And that's when you realize things are about to get political. Because Athens isn't some sleepy hillside town with 3 goats and a repressed trauma archive. It's the intellectual supernova of the Greek world. Democracy, philosophy, theater, the whole big brain buffet. And Dionysus. He's not exactly what you'd call *establishment. Friendly asterisk. But he knows something Athens doesn't. They need him. Mainstream historical reality check. Athens, the birthplace of classical drama, eventually makes Dionysus its patron of theater. But that wasn't always the case. Early on, his cult was considered suspicious, too wild, too emotional, too rural. The city loved order. Dionysus loved deconstructing it with interpretive dance and questionable animal sacrifices. So how does he pull it off? he changes costume. Dionysus arrives not as a roaring god of madness, but as a soft-spoken deity of wine, joy, and community engagement. He reinvents himself for the Athenian audience. No panthers, no women with elk heads, just a nice robe, a peaceful procession, and the promise of excellent festival turnout. Fringe tidbit. In Athens, the festival of Dionysia was one of the biggest civic events of the year. It included parades, sacrifices, performances, and public drunkenness so widespread it made city planning a nightmare. All in honor of the god who once wore vines like a political statement. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was domesticated by the Athenians or if he seduced them with a slow burn. But watching him now, you know better. He's playing the long game. The Athenians want order. He gives them structure. They want performance. He hands them tragedy. They want catharsis. He gives them an emotional blender and calls it drama. He doesn't conquer the city. He infiltrates its soul. You're there when the first theater is built in his name. A simple semicircle. Stone seats. A space carved for voice, for echo, for transformation. And at the center always a statue of Dionysus, watching every line, smirking through every monologue. Every tragedy performed at his festival becomes both offering and spectacle, and the people, they eat it up. They cry at Oedipus, gasp at Medea, laugh nervously through comedies that insult their politicians by name. And all the while, Dionysus sits silently behind the mask, sipping the collective emotion like a fine vintage. This is his most elegant revenge, yet no vines, no blood, just a stage, and silence. And the exquisite pleasure of making an entire city confront its darkest impulses in daylight, while pretending it's asterisk. Entertainment asterisk. You lean back on the stone seats, watch the actors move beneath the sun. The masks amplify their grief. The chorus chants in spirals. Someone in the front row quietly sobs. And behind it all, Dionysus watches. Content, almost. Because Athens didn't just let him in, they crowned him. You wake to chanting. Low, rhythmic, familiar, but not the wild cries of the Maenads or the frenzied drums of the forest. This is quieter, almost reverent, like someone trying to summon a god they're not entirely sure they want to meet. You're in a city again, not Athens, not Thebes, somewhere smaller, sacred, the kind of place where the air tastes old and the stones remember being altars. And beside you, as always, is Dionysus barefoot, grape-stained, and humming along to the chants. Like he wrote them. He probably did, and that's when it hits you. He's the only Olympian who leaves Olympus. Zeus might hurl lightning down. Athena might lend you strategy from afar. But Dionysus, he walks, he travels, he visits, he shows up. Not just for ceremonies or vengeance, for everything. Weddings, births, harvests, theater rehearsals. One very questionable drinking contest with a donkey. Mainstream fact drop. Dionysus is the most itinerant of the gods. Unlike most Olympians, who stay relatively fixed in domain and geography, Dionysus wanders. His myths span from Greece to Phrygia to India. He doesn't send signs. He arrives, in person, with wine. And every time he arrives, something changes. Not always catastrophically, sometimes subtly. A new vine in the garden. A child laughing louder than they should. A merchant who stops selling and starts singing. Dionysus doesn't need temples. He makes moments holy. Fringe tidbit. In some ancient cities, Dionysus was honored in secret midnight ceremonies. No torches, no announcements. Just a quiet procession of believers walking into the woods. They left behind their names, their jobs, their shame. And if they came back, they were never quite the same. Historians still argue whether these rites were truly religious or proto-psychological. Were they sacred rituals or ancient group therapy? Either way, they worked. Because Dionysus gets it. He understands that transformation doesn't happen in marble halls. It happens in motion, in exile, in the strange lands where no one knows your name and the rules haven't been carved into stone yet. And that's why he keeps moving. You see him now in the marketplace, whispering jokes to a fishmonger who laughs too hard and knocks over a barrel of eels. He slips into a classroom, murmurs something to a bored student, who suddenly gets up and writes a love poem that accidentally changes the city's dialect forever. He dances barefoot with children until they forget who their fathers told them to be. He doesn't fix people. He unravels them, gently, artfully, with grapes. And when he leaves behind stories, not commandments, not laws, just stories. Strange, lovely, terrifying ones. Stories that make people sit around fires and whisper, "Remember when he came? Did you see him? I think he touched my hair." You walk beside him now through a quiet vineyard. He stops, picks a grape. "This one," he says, "is going to start a rebellion, or a love affair, or both." And he pops it into his mouth. You don't ask what he means, because by now you've learned, with Dionysus, the journey is the message. The map is written in footprints and spilled wine, and the destination doesn't matter. You blink, and suddenly you're standing in a city made of marble and pride. Everything here feels staged, but not in the Dionysian way, more like the kind of order that screams overcompensation. Welcome back to Athens, and not just any Athens. Peak Athens. The philosophers are arguing. The orators are orating. The citizens are voting on something important, probably sandals. And right in the middle of it all, Dionysus walks in wearing leopard print and zero apology. This time, he doesn't sneak in. He's already made his grand entrance. The Athenians know him now, but he's about to do something they don't expect. Institutionalize. Because that's how you win the long game. Mainstream historical reality check. Athens eventually makes Dionysus the patron of its most important public festival, the city Dionysia. Think Coachella meets the Oscars, meets a statement-dated emotional breakdown. For several days each year, everything in the city stops. Trials. No farming, just theater, and wine, and masks, and sobbing. In that order. But this wasn't always just a party. It was civic duty, funded by the city, attended by politicians, overseen by priests of Dionysus. Even the front row had assigned seats for important citizens. Imagine your local mayor ugly crying through Antigone while holding a program made of papyrus, and at the center of it all, a wooden statue of Dionysus, brought into the city, given offerings, and placed in the theater like a guest of honor, like a god who knows he's the reason the plot thickens. Fringe tidbit. The festival began with a parade where phalluses, literal giant phalluses, were carried through the streets, symbolizing fertility, transformation, and probably the earliest example of NSFW civic pride. Dionysus loved that part. Historians still argue whether this festival was meant to honor Dionysus or tame him. Give the god of chaos a stage, maybe he'll stay off your streets. But Dionysus, he sees it differently. To him, the theater isn't a leash, it's an altar. You follow him into the theater of Dionysus, nestled beneath the Acropolis like a secret joke the Parthenon doesn't get. The stone seats curve around the orchestra. The air hums with anticipation. And Dionysus, barefoot as always, walks right onto the stage. No script, no mask, just presence. The plays begin. Tragedies first, 3 in a row. Bleak, brutal, beautiful. Oedipus tears out his eyes. Medea slaughters her children. Agamemnon gets axed in the bathtub. And the audience, they feel everything. They're wrecked, publicly, loudly, because that's the deal. Dionysus doesn't just show you drama. He requires your breakdown. Then, a comedy, vulgar, ridiculous. Half the cast wears exaggerated masks and makes jokes about city officials' body odor. Someone sings a song about wine that turns into a dance battle with a donkey. It's all very sacred. You glance at Dionysus. He's glowing, because this is the point. To turn suffering into art. To turn grief into ritual. To make people feel something, deeply, collectively, and leave changed, not fixed, just different. And in that moment, you understand something. Dionysus didn't invent the theater because he wanted applause. He invented it because it was the only place he ever felt seen, the only place where contradictions could live side by side. Laughter and sobbing, death and rebirth, drag queens and prophets, where gods and mortals could share a stage. He doesn't demand belief, he demands participation, and Athens, bless its structured little heart, gave him that stage. The lights never dim in ancient Athens, but tonight, something softer settles over the city. A kind of breath held between acts. And you're still in the theater. Your legs a little numb from sitting on stone. Your brain foggy from too much emotion and possibly not enough olives. Dionysus, he's backstage, which, in this case, means lounging behind a painted backdrop that smells like sweat, incense, and ego. He's sipping wine, of course, never from the same cup twice, and watching the actors rehearse with the amused detachment of someone who knows the entire script and how it ends. Because this is his victory lap. You've seen the madness, the Maenads, the pirates, the unhinged woodland therapy sessions. But this, the theater this, is his ultimate move, because Dionysus invented it just to be petty. Mainstream historical truth bomb, Greek theater, as we know it, literally evolved out of Dionysian religious rituals. Before there were plays, there were dithyrambs, choral hymns sung in his honor. Over time, these chants morphed into dialogue, then characters, then full-blown dramatic competitions. You can still hear the DNA of it now. The rhythm, the chanting, the echo of sacred nonsense. The actors wear masks, not just to project emotion, but to channel something else, something God-adjacent. And let's be honest, no one but Dionysus would look at a drunken group karaoke ritual and say, this needs more existential dread and better acoustics. Fringe tidbit. The first known playwright, Thespis, allegedly stepped out of the chorus to become the first actor around 534 BCE during a Dionysian festival. And yes, Thespian comes from his name, which makes Dionysus not only the god of wine, but the godfather of every theater kid who's ever sobbed into stage makeup. Historians still argue whether Dionysus wanted theater to humanize him more, humiliate his enemies. Because what's more cutting than forcing a whole city to reenact its own traumas for entertainment? What's more powerful than crafting empathy into ritual? He doesn't use weapons, he uses scripts, and he knows the subtext always cuts deeper than the line. You watch him adjust the actor's mask himself now, gently, like a priest dressing an icon. He whispers something to the performer, probably devastating, and steps back to watch. You want to ask him why he cares so much. Why make a whole genre of art just to make a point? And maybe he hears your thought, because he turns, smiling, and says, "Because they laughed when I cried." You freeze, because that's the real motive. Not worship, not legacy, just recognition. He was mocked, rejected, laughed at. And so he built an entire public system where everyone is required to feel, loudly, visibly, together, and he made it fun. You sit back down as the next play begins. It's a comedy, offensive, obscene, weirdly insightful. Someone's wearing a giant bird costume. The chorus is doing coordinated hikes. A joke about Zeus's thunderbolt lands way too hard with the older folks, and Dionysus laughs, not like a god, like someone who finally made the world weird enough to feel like home. You don't know what time it is anymore. Days and plays blur together. The sun rises, actors cry, the chorus chants, someone dies, metaphorically or dramatically, and then the wine flows like applause. You're still in Athens, still orbiting Dionysus, still caught in the beautiful, exhausting machinery of his pet project, theater. It's no longer just a stage. It's a civic ritual, an emotional sandbox, a government-approved group therapy disguised as art. And Dionysus. He's everywhere, not physically, always. But you feel him in every line delivered just a little too loud, in the way the audience sighs in unison, in the smell of spilt wine and backstage nerves. He's the silence before the laugh, the chill during the soliloquy, the moment someone gasps and realizes they are the tragedy. Mainstream historical fact: by the 5th century BCE, the Athenian theatre system was a full-blown civic institution. Playwrights submitted trilogies of tragedies to be performed at the Dionysia. Winners were honored, losers were heckled, citizens were expected to attend. It wasn't just entertainment, it was education. Catharsis by city ordinance, and every year, like clockwork, Dionysus got his tribute. Pain turned into poetry. But it wasn't all doom and incest. Enter comedy. While tragedy dealt with fate and suffering, comedy showed the ridiculous underbelly of Greek society. The corruption, the gossip, the body parts best left unmentioned. Think political satire meets burlesque, meets absurdist fever dream, fringe tidbit, Aristophanes. The most famous comic playwright of ancient Greece once wrote a play where the chorus was made entirely of frogs. Another featured women taking over the Athenian assembly. Another suggested that the philosopher Socrates was a cloud-worshipping scam artist. All of these were performed at Dionysus's festival. He loved it, because nothing dethrones power like laughter. Historians still argue whether comedy was truly sacred or just tolerated chaos. But you, sitting here, watching a man in a bird costume argue with a sausage vendor, see the holiness in the absurd, because Dionysus's theater isn't about realism, it's about revealism. Tragedy strips you down, comedy calls your bluff. Both leave you exposed, and neither lets you leave unchanged. You catch sight of Dionysus during the interlude. He's leaned against a pillar, watching the crowd instead of the stage, smiling faintly, like he's seeing something no one else does. And maybe he is, because what he's built here isn't just a festival. It's a mirror, a ritual, a recurring, city-wide hallucination where the gods step into human skin, and humans, briefly, become something divine. You remember that this is the god who was born of fire and thigh, who wandered, raged, wept, who made forests echo and kings weep in drag. And now his final form is this: a man in a mask, a laugh that hides a scream, a play that ends with no applause, only understanding. You lean back. The next performance begins, and Dionysus disappears into the audience like a whisper, with eyeliner. The sky over Athens turns darker now, indigo tinged with burnt orange, like the final act of a play too rich with metaphor to end cleanly. You're walking alongside Dionysus again, down narrow alleys that reek of spilled wine, bad poetry, and philosophical arguments gone physically aggressive. He doesn't say much, just hums, something tuneless and a little off-kilter, which is fitting, because tonight you meet both of him, not a twin, not a reflection, but Dionysus, the dual. This is the part where things start to shimmer, where the god you thought you understood becomes something else. Because Dionysus isn't just a wine-soaked drama queen with flair and a backstory. He's a walking paradox. Joy and destruction, ecstasy and revenge, a kiss with fangs. Mainstream myth, Dionysus has always embodied duality. He's a god of opposites, mortal and divine, male and feminine, creator and destroyer. His rites are full of transformations that contradict themselves. His worshippers sing of freedom through madness, life through death, order through wildness. He doesn't offer clarity. He offers contrast, and that makes him dangerous. Tonight, you see it up close. One moment, he's helping an old man tie his sandals, smiling gently. The next, he's staring down a priest who dared suggest a festival should be shortened to keep the streets cleaner. There's a quiet tension in him, the kind that makes you wonder if he's always 3 heartbeats away from collapsing into either laughter or blood. Fringe tidbit: in some rituals, Dionysus was invoked not just with wine, but with raw meat. Worshippers would tear apart animals. In symbolic frenzy, sparagmos, they called it. Not out of cruelty, out of transformation. To consume what is wild, to become it. That was his gospel. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was ever truly tamed by the Greeks, or just temporarily adapted for public consumption, like a wildfire dressed in formal wear. But tonight, under this cracked moonlight, there's no taming in sight. He leads you out of the city now, back into the woods. The torches flicker, the air thickens, and you realize something unnerving. The Maenads have returned. Not all of them, just a few, but enough to remind you of the other Dionysus, the one with ivy in his hair and frenzy in his hands. They move like smoke, like dreams, half remembered, and he joins them without hesitation, because that's the truth of it. He needs both. He needs the theater and the wild, the applause and the scream. Dionysus is not whole without contradiction. He's the tear-streaked mask that laughs, the broken man who heals others by breaking them too. He's the god who destroys your boundaries so you can remember what your soul sounds like. And you're caught in the middle. You dance with them, unsure where your body ends and the god's music begins. Time slips sideways. The stars rearrange. Someone sings your name backwards, and it feels like a spell. Dionysus watches, not smiling this time, but seeing. Deep, whole, like he's reading the part of you you didn't know existed. Then the moment passes. The fire dies down, and he takes your hand. Both, he says. You must be both, and you understand. You don't get to worship Dionysus in half measures. He's not the god of moderation. He's the god of everything. All at once. Too much. Exactly enough. The wind shifts. You're no longer in Greece. The air smells different, now heavier, spicier, tinged with something imperial. The roads are straighter. The gods wear different names. You realize you've crossed into Rome, and Dionysus. He's already here, except now he answers to Bacchus, same god. New branding, and like any ancient reboot, it comes with drama. You're walking beside him through the crowded streets of early Rome, where statues of Jupiter glare down like they own the place. Bacchus doesn't flinch. He smiles, throws on a red cloak, and steps into the chaos like he invented it, which, in many ways, he did. The Romans don't quite know what to do with him. Mainstream fact time. When the cult of Bacchus swept into Rome, it did so hard. What started as a few ecstatic rituals exploded into a social phenomenon. Thousands of followers, secret ceremonies, midnight rites. Women, slaves, the poor people, the Roman elite weren't used to seeing so free. And Bacchus, he loved every second of it. His followers met in dark woods and candlelit cellars. They drank, they danced, they spoke in tongues. It wasn't just worship. It was rebellion in a disguise made of flowers and goat skins. Fringe tidbit. The Roman Senate found the whole thing so threatening that in 186 BCE, they issued the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus, a formal decree banning Bacchic rites across the Republic. Too wild, too uncontrollable, too democratic. The state was like, no more late-night Maenad meetings, no more panther chariots. Please stick to socially sanctioned sobbing. Historians still argue whether the Senate's fear was legitimate or moral panic whipped up to control the masses. But you can read between the lines. Rome didn't fear Dionysus because he was foreign. They feared him because he gave power to people who weren't Dot and Bacchus. He didn't rage. He didn't fight. He adapted. You see it happening around you. The rites go underground, more secretive, more theatrical. The masks get fancier, the metaphors get deeper, and the wine keeps flowing. Bacchus morphs into something even more potent than a god. He becomes a mood dot, a symbol dot of freedom, of indulgence, of not caring what the Senate thinks because you're covered in ivy, and having an existential awakening in the middle of a flute solo. You watch as artists begin painting him softer, more feminine, slouched over in decadence, or curled up with a smirk, surrounded by nymphs and half-empty chalices. The Romans don't just adopt him, they aestheticize him, and that's the risk. Because somewhere in the marble villas and garden sculptures, you notice something slipping. The edge, the danger, the duality. Bacchus is becoming a mascot, and Dionysus, the one who once made kings, weep and mothers rave. He's fading behind the wine labels. You turn to him, still at your side, still watching. He shrugs. Let them sleep, he says. I'll be waiting when they wake up. Because he knows, repression always creates rebound. And when Rome partied too hard, it was only ever his voice singing through the cracks. You find yourself backstage, again not in a theater, but in a temple. Except it doesn't feel like worship. It feels like waiting for a show to start. There's incense burning in a cracked brazier, animal skins draped over pillars, a nervous priest adjusting his mask in a polished bronze mirror. Somewhere outside, a crowd murmurs, half drunk on wine and expectation. Dionysus isn't there, not yet. But everyone's acting like he might walk in at any moment and demand a monologue. This is what it's like when your god is also a performer, and performance, for Dionysus, has always meant power, mainstream truth. Unlike most Greek gods, whose temples were solemn spaces of prayer and offering, Dionysus's rituals blurred the line between religion and theater. His priests didn't just bless you, they acted. His rites weren't recited, they were staged. And his followers, they didn't observe, they joined in. You peer behind the curtain, now literally, because behind every priest of Dionysus is someone trying not to forget their lines, wondering whether this act of devotion will end in applause, epiphany, or an emotionally intense identity crisis. And that's by design. Dionysus never wanted worship that was clean. He wanted transformation, which meant getting messy. You sit beside a prophet, now a woman, with wild eyes and a voice like broken glass over honey. She's explaining how she met the god in a fever dream and woke up speaking riddles that turned out to be accurate stock predictions. She's revered, respected, slightly feared, and yet beneath it all you can tell. She's performing, not pretending. Performing. Dionysus taught her that truth lives behind the mask, that revelation sometimes comes dressed in costume and glitter, and that vulnerability, it's strongest when it's scripted so well it breaks itself open. Fringe tidbit: some ancient rituals of Dionysus involved actual stage makeup and chorus practice, not for a crowd, but for the god. A sacred rehearsal where divine communion meant hitting your emotional cues with tears and timing. Historians still argue whether these performances were purely symbolic or deeply psychological. Was this religion, or ancient emotional therapy disguised as song and choreography? Either way, it worked. People came in one way and left other. And in a society where roles were rigid, Dionysus offered escape. For women, for slaves, for anyone stuck inside a social script they didn't write. His cult let you play a part you weren't allowed to be in daylight. It wasn't just sacred, it was rebellious. You're watching one of those ceremonies now. There's a veil, a chant, a pause just long enough to break something open inside. The chest, and then laughter. Unscripted, loud, from the gut. Someone drops to their knees, someone else dances until they fall over. The priest whispers a line from a lost tragedy into your ear. To be seen is to bleed sweetly. And you get it, because behind the drama, behind the wine and wildness, Dionysus is teaching something radical. Performance is not a lie. It's a language, and for those crushed by silence and order, theater became the only way to speak truth. So, you put on your mask, step onto the makeshift stage, and wait for the god to cue your entrance. You're walking through smoke now, not the kind from incense or sacrifice, but the heavier kind. Philosophical smoke, the kind that curls out of books, pipe dreams, and too many evenings alone with big thoughts and bigger metaphors. You've left the temples, left the stages, and you're somewhere colder. This is the 19th century, and Dionysus is back, but not as a god, as an asterisk. Concept asterisk. You're in a library or maybe a fever dream of one. Books line the walls like polite captives. There's a man scribbling furiously in a corner, his moustache trembling with intensity. His name is Friedrich Nietzsche, and he's about to turn Dionysus into the ultimate emo philosopher mood board. Mainstream scholarly shift. Nietzsche's The Birth of Tragedy reintroduces Dionysus not as a wine god, but as a force of chaotic truth. He pairs him with Apollo, god of order, clarity, and reason, and frames them as eternal opposites. Dionysus becomes the wild pulse beneath civilization, the scream behind the mask, and just like that, your chaotic drama king is reborn as an existential theory. Fringe tidbit. Nietzsche wasn't content to write about Dionysus. He wanted to become him in his later letters, often signed Dionysus, or the crucified Nietzsche, begins blurring lines between identity and idea. Some scholars see it as genius, others a breakdown. Dionysus would have probably called it performance. Art. Historians still argue whether Nietzsche understood Dionysus or just used him. But what's undeniable is that this reinvention stuck. Suddenly, Dionysus isn't just a myth. He's a principle, a stand-in for every artist who screams against the tidy order of things. Every thinker who finds God not in law, but in laughter, wine, and collapse. You see him now, Dionysus, sitting beside Nietzsche in the dream library, sipping absinthe and thumbing through a manuscript. He looks amused, less glamour, more shadow, more idea than man. But he's still there, still smirking, and he's evolved. He no longer needs a temple or a cult. He lives now in conflict, in every artist torn between the beautiful and the true, in every philosopher chasing reason until it shatters. This version of him is leaner, meaner, less glitter, more glitch. He doesn't lead maenads into the woods anymore. He dances in the footnotes of tragic plays and tattoos himself onto the backs of band posters. You feel it in your chest. He's no longer external, he's internal. Dionysus as impulse, Dionysus as hunger, Dionysus as the scream you don't let out in polite society because someone might hand you a pamphlet or call HR. The theatre's gone, but the drama remains. You turn to Nietzsche, who looks up from his notes with eyes too bright for someone this sleep-deprived. He never left, he says, gesturing to the smoke, the shadow, the laughter hidden in the footnotes. You just forgot where to look. And Dionysus winks, because he always knew the philosophers would crack eventually. He just waited for them to spiral artistically. You wake up in a high school auditorium. No, really. The chairs are plastic. Your hoodie smells like panic, and there's a kid on stage trying to remember the third act of the Bacchae, while a drama teacher mouths the lines from the wings like, their soul depends on it. Welcome to modernity, where Dionysus no longer rides panthers, he drives a used sedan and teaches elective theatre. He's still here, though you spot him instantly, slouching in the back row, hoodie over curls, combat, boots resting on the seat in front of him. He's chewing on a pencil. He's definitely not in the cast, but he's the reason the lead actor just cried in rehearsal. Again, because somewhere between Nietzsche and Netflix, Dionysus became something else entirely, a mascot. Not for wine, not even for chaos, but for theatre kids, mainstream cultural drift. Dionysus has slowly transformed into the unofficial patron of queer kids, drama nerds, chaos-loving creatives, and anyone who's ever sobbed into glitter while yelling about artistic truth. He shows up in college productions, Tumblr posts, and Dungeons & Dragons campaigns, not as a god, as a vibe. And unlike the other gods, who got left in the museums, Dionysus thrives. Because he keeps changing costumes. He doesn't demand temple C, asks for playlists. He doesn't need statues, just tattoos and chaotic memes. His mythology is duct-taped into fanfiction. His name whispered before opening nights like a ritual. Fringe tidbit. There's a growing corner of the internet that treats Dionysus not just as a historical figure, but as a spiritual ally. They leave offerings of wine, playlists, and badly drawn goat art. Some say he responds. Most agree he appreciates the drama. Historians still argue whether this modern version of Dionysus is a resurrection or a reinvention. But honestly, does it matter? He's being felt. The same god who once tore kings apart with wild women now inspires performance majors to write interpretive monologues about self-love and chaos. He's the wink behind every hot mess aesthetic. The divine permission slip that says, feel everything. Wear sequins. Break the fourth wall. You watch him watching the stage. The actors stumble, recover, overact. The lighting is bad. The drama is too much. And it is perfect. He leans toward you. They don't even know I'm here, he whispers. And he grins, because they don't have to. You see him on TikTok now, mashed into sound clips and lip syncs. On Twitter, where users ironically refer to him as the drama god with bisexual lighting. On stage at community theaters where people cry for reasons they can't name. Dionysus has transcended worship. He's become relatable. He's the chaos friend. The soft-voiced anarchist. The one who tells you it's okay to be loud and weird and crying in the bathroom after your one big scene, and if you think that's not sacred, you haven't been to a high school production of Eurydice on opening night. The lights go down, not on a stage, but in your mind. That subtle dimming that comes just before sleep, when the stories blur at the edges and the gods start to feel like dreams you once almost remembered. And Dionysus, he's still with you. Always has been. But now, he's no longer a figure walking beside you. He's everywhere, in the rhythm of a chant, in the echo of applause, in the way your stomach twists before a big performance, in the laughter that comes too fast, in the grief that hits sideways, in the moment someone says, I see you, and you know they mean it. This is the part of the story where he fades, not because he's gone, because he doesn't need to be visible anymore. Mainstream closing note: Dionysus never had the towering temples of Zeus or the pristine philosophies of Apollo, but he outlasted them in ways that matter. His rituals became art forms. His chaos became catharsis. His madness became metaphor. And his name, still whispered, still worn, still felt, fringe. Cultural detail. Today, Dionysus appears in tarot decks, pride parades, poetry slams, and indie music lyrics. People light candles to him on dorm room desks. Actors thank him in acceptance speeches. Writers invoke him when the plot breaks. He's the patron saint of what if, and why not. Historians still argue whether he was real, but at this point, it doesn't matter, because Dionysus doesn't live in certainty. He thrives in contradiction. He was born twice, loved and hated, worshipped and banned, seen and ignored. And every time he's forgotten, he simply shapeshifts again. So as you lie there, eyes closing, the final image burns soft behind your lids. A god on a stage, barefoot, arms open, mask slipping just enough to show a smile, not smug, not cruel, inviting, because he never really wanted your fear, just your attention, and maybe your wine. Now dim the lights. If they're not already on, let your mind slip into that ancient velvet hum. The crowd has gone home. The curtain has fallen, but Dionysus, he's still somewhere in the wings, waiting for your next entrance. The stage is dark now. The music has faded, the crowd long gone. What remains is stillness, sacred. You're back in your body, wherever it's resting, swaddled in the hush of night and the slow rhythm of breath. Dionysus no longer walks beside you, not because he's vanished, but because you've carried him inward, his story, layered in contradiction and chaos, has settled behind your eyes like the last ember of a fire that refuses to go out. Let your limbs go soft now. The masks are off. The roles are folded neatly beside you. There's no one to perform for. Just the deep, quiet truth that you have always been more than one thing at once, and that's not a flaw. It's your inheritance. Breathe in, feel the weight of sleep approaching, not as an ending, but as a curtain closing on this chapter of myth and memory. The world can wait. The questions, the noise, the overthinking, they'll still be there tomorrow. But for now, you have permission to rest, to let the strange beauty of Dionysus lull you into softness. A vine curling in slow motion, a spotlight fading into dusk, a god smiling in the silence between dreams. Sleep well, dear listener. The show is over, but your story continues. End of script. Sweet dreams.